Adolf Hitler, from failed artist to the man who changed the world. In the late 19th century, a boy was born in a small town in Austria. No one could have imagined that this child would grow up to become one of the most influential and controversial figures in human history. His name was Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, Austria, near the German border. His father was a strict customs official, while his mother was known for her kindness and affection toward him. As a young boy, Hitler was not particularly interested in academics. Instead, he dreamed of becoming a professional artist. After the deaths of his parents, Hitler moved to Vienna to pursue his artistic ambitions. He applied twice to the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna, but was rejected both times. These rejections marked a difficult period in his life. He struggled financially, often living in poverty and earning small amounts of money by selling paintings and postcards. While living in Vienna, Hitler became increasingly interested in politics. He spent much of his time reading newspapers, observing political movements, and developing ideas that would later shape his worldview. These beliefs would eventually become central to the ideology he promoted throughout his political career. In 1913, Hitler moved to Germany. A year later, World War I broke out, and he volunteered to serve in the German army. He fought on the Western Front and received military decorations for bravery. Like many German soldiers, he was devastated when Germany was defeated in 1918. The end of the war had a profound impact on him and heavily influenced his future political ambitions. After the war, Germany faced severe economic and political instability. Inflation soared, unemployment increased, and many Germans felt humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, which imposed harsh penalties on the country. These conditions created an environment in which radical political movements could gain support. During this period, Hitler joined a small political group that would later become known as the Nazi Party. He quickly gained attention because of his powerful public speaking skills. His speeches attracted large crowds, and his popularity within the party grew rapidly. In 1923, Hitler attempted to seize power in what became known as the Beer Hall Putsch, a failed coup in Munich. The attempt was unsuccessful, and he was arrested and sentenced to prison. While serving his sentence, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, My Struggle, outlining his political beliefs and vision for Germany's future. After his release from prison, Hitler changed his strategy. Instead of trying to take power by force, he focused on winning elections and gaining political influence through legal means. As Germany's economic crisis worsened during the Great Depression, support for the Nazi Party increased dramatically. In January 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Over the following months, he consolidated power, weakened democratic institutions, and eliminated political opposition. Germany soon became a dictatorship under his control. Hitler launched major public works projects and expanded military production, which helped reduce unemployment and improved economic conditions for many Germans. These achievements increased his popularity among some segments of the population. At the same time, however, his government imposed strict control over society, suppressed dissent, and relied heavily on propaganda. One of Hitler's major goals was to restore Germany's military strength. Despite restrictions imposed after World War I, he expanded the armed forces and began pursuing territorial expansion across Europe. In 1938, Germany annexed Austria. Soon afterward, Hitler demanded additional territories from neighboring countries. European leaders initially hoped that diplomatic concessions would prevent another major war, but tensions continued to rise. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. This marked the beginning of World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history. In the early years of the war, Germany achieved a series of remarkable military victories. Poland, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France all fell under German control within a relatively short period. Many observers believed Germany had become unstoppable. However, in 1941, Hitler made one of the most consequential decisions of the war by launching an invasion of the Soviet Union. The campaign initially advanced rapidly but eventually stalled due to fierce resistance, logistical problems, and the harsh Russian winter. Later that same year, the United States entered the war following Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. Germany now faced a powerful alliance that included the Soviet Union, the United States, and the British Empire. During the war, the Nazi regime carried out systematic persecution and mass murder on an unprecedented scale. The Holocaust resulted in the deaths of approximately 6 million Jews, along with millions of other victims, including political prisoners, disabled individuals, and members of other targeted groups. The Holocaust remains one of the darkest chapters in human history. As the war continued, Germany's situation deteriorated. Allied forces gained momentum on multiple fronts. In June 1944, Allied troops landed in Normandy, France, opening a major Western front. Meanwhile, Soviet forces advanced from the east toward Germany. By early 1945, Germany was on the verge of collapse. Allied armies were closing in from all directions, and Berlin was surrounded. Hitler retreated to an underground bunker beneath the city, where he spent his final days. On April 30, 1945, with Germany's defeat inevitable, Adolf Hitler died in the bunker. A few days later, Germany officially surrendered, bringing the war in Europe to an end. World War II left a devastating legacy. Tens of millions of people lost their lives, entire cities were destroyed, and the political landscape of the world was permanently transformed. The conflict also led to the creation of new international institutions and reshaped global relations for decades to come. Today, Adolf Hitler remains one of the most studied figures in modern history. His rise to power, his role in World War II, and the crimes committed under his regime continue to be examined by historians around the world. His story serves as a reminder of the dangers of dictatorship, extremism, unchecked political power, and hatred. Understanding this history is important not only for learning about the past, but also for recognizing the importance of democracy, human rights, and peaceful cooperation among nations. The final days and Hitler's legacy. As Soviet forces entered Berlin in April 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing. The once powerful German military could no longer defend the capital. Buildings were reduced to rubble, supplies were running out, and millions of civilians were fleeing the advancing armies. Deep beneath Berlin, Adolf Hitler remained in an underground bunker surrounded by a small group of loyal followers. Reports from the battlefield became increasingly grim. One by one, German defenses collapsed, and it became clear that the war was lost. Despite the hopeless situation, Hitler refused to leave the city. He continued issuing military orders, even though many of the units he commanded no longer existed. His advisors urged him to escape, but he rejected the idea. On April 29, 1945, Hitler married his longtime companion, Eva Braun, inside the bunker. It was a brief ceremony held as explosions echoed throughout Berlin. The next day, April 30, 1945, Hitler and Eva Braun died inside the bunker. Shortly afterward, their bodies were taken outside and burned according to Hitler's instructions. A few days later, on May 8, 1945, Germany officially surrendered to the Allied powers. The war in Europe had ended. The cost of World War II was staggering. More than 60 million people lost their lives. Entire cities were destroyed, economies were devastated, and millions of families were left grieving loved ones. The revelations that followed shocked the world. As Allied forces liberated concentration camps, they uncovered evidence of mass murder and horrific crimes committed by the Nazi regime. These discoveries led to international trials where many Nazi leaders were prosecuted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The aftermath of the war reshaped the world. Germany was divided into separate zones controlled by the victorious Allies. Europe entered a new era marked by the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Today, historians continue to study Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany to understand how such a regime rose to power. Many experts point to a combination of economic hardship, political instability, propaganda, and authoritarian leadership as factors that contributed to his rise. Hitler's story remains one of the most important lessons in modern history. It demonstrates how hatred, extremism, and unchecked political power can lead to catastrophic consequences. His legacy is remembered not for achievement, but as a warning of what can happen when democracy, human rights, and tolerance are abandoned. More than 80 years after the end of World War II, the events of that era continue to influence international politics, education, and discussions about human rights. The story of Adolf Hitler is not only about one man, it is also a reminder of the importance of vigilance against tyranny and the responsibilities societies have to protect freedom and justice. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this historical documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true stories from history. Could history have been different? One of the most fascinating questions historians continue to ask is, could World War II have been avoided? Some experts believe that if Germany's economic crisis had not become so severe during the 1920s and early 1930s, Adolf Hitler might never have gained widespread support. Others argue that the political instability of the time created the perfect conditions for radical movements to flourish. The Great Depression, which began in 1929, left millions of Germans unemployed. Families struggled to survive, businesses collapsed, and confidence in democratic institutions weakened. In such an environment, many people were willing to support leaders who promised dramatic change. Hitler was an exceptionally skilled speaker. He understood how to connect with large audiences and present himself as someone who could restore national pride and economic stability. Through rallies, speeches, newspapers, posters, and radio broadcasts, the Nazi Party built one of the most effective propaganda machines in history. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda, played a major role in shaping public opinion. The government controlled information, censored criticism, and promoted messages designed to strengthen support for the regime. As Hitler's power grew, many people inside and outside Germany underestimated the danger he posed. Some political leaders believed they could control him. Others assumed that his ambitions would remain limited. History would prove those assumptions wrong. As Germany expanded across Europe, opposition became increasingly difficult. Countries that had hoped to avoid another devastating war often chose negotiation over confrontation. However, each concession encouraged further aggression. By the time World War II began in 1939, the conflict quickly expanded beyond anything most leaders had anticipated. The war transformed military technology forever. Tanks, aircraft, submarines, and advanced weapons were used on an unprecedented scale. Entire cities became targets of bombing campaigns. Civilians found themselves directly affected by modern warfare in ways never seen before. The conflict also accelerated scientific and technological development. Radar systems improved dramatically, medical treatments advanced, and new industrial methods were developed. However, these achievements came at an enormous human cost. By the end of the war, much of Europe lay in ruins. Entire generations had experienced years of violence, destruction, and loss. Millions of refugees were displaced from their homes. Families were separated, and communities were devastated. The lessons learned from World War II influenced the creation of international organizations dedicated to maintaining peace and preventing future conflicts. Nations recognized the need for stronger cooperation and diplomacy in order to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. Today, museums, memorials, documentaries, and historical archives preserve the memory of this period. They serve as reminders of the consequences of war, intolerance, and authoritarian rule. For historians, Adolf Hitler remains one of the most studied figures of the 20th century. His rise demonstrates how economic hardship, political instability, and effective propaganda can reshape entire societies. For the rest of the world, his story serves as a warning. It reminds us that democracy is fragile, that misinformation can be powerful, and that protecting human rights requires constant vigilance. The events surrounding Hitler's rise and fall continue to be taught in schools and universities around the world because understanding the past is one of the best ways to protect the future. And with that, we have reached the end of today's story. From a young man who dreamed of becoming an artist to a political leader who changed the course of world history, Adolf Hitler's life remains one of the most studied and controversial stories ever told. His rise to power, the devastation of World War II, and the lessons left behind continue to remind us how important freedom, tolerance, and human rights truly are. History is filled with incredible stories. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay curious, keep learning, and remember, history is not just about the past. It helps us understand the future. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.